Today we're going to be learning Beitzah Daf Daled. This is the Daf for Shabbat. We're going to start with a quick review. We had 4 different opinions of the Mishnah about Beitzah Shenolda B'Yom Tov, what the reason for the forbidden, for the fact that Beit Hillel does not permit eating this. The last 2 answers we saw were Gzeira because of Perot HaNoshrim. It's similar to fruits falling from trees or from liquids seeping out of fruits. And because of that, we forbid it so that you don't come to think that those are permitted. To which the Gemara asked a question from a Beitzah on both of those opinions about the Beitzah said, Speika Asura, when you have a case of an egg, we say a doubtful situation is forbidden. To which we said, and then also the Beitzah said, if it gets mixed up with another 1,000, then all of them are forbidden. To which we said, why exactly would that be an issue? If it's only a Gzeira de Rabbanan, it's rabbinic, we should be lenient if there's a suffix, and it should be nullified. To which the Gemara answered, we must be talking about a suffix treifa case. This has nothing to do with Beitzah Shenolda. The suffix about this egg was a different issue, but whether it came from a treifa animal or not, an animal that would have died within 12 months, that's the question. To which they said, well, if it's a suffix treifa, it should be batel, because it should be batel berov. Once it's mixed up in a mixture and there's more good eggs and only one doubtful egg, it should be nullified. To which the Gemara answered, it's not nullified because it's a davar chashuv. It's something important. Why is it important? Because it's sold by amount. But then we say, well, it's only sold by amount. Sometimes it's also sold by estimation, right? Nowadays, we always buy a dozen eggs, but in those days, right, even now it could be 18, but in those days, they would buy a whole bundle of eggs without counting exactly. In which case, it really depends on whose opinion you hold by, in which case, we're still left with the question, because the Machlok of Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish about it. Then we answered, Rav Papa answered, well, actually, the Tana of that Beitzah, it's still, yes, Safek Treifa. Soon we're going to see a different answer entirely. But right now, we're going to assume it's Safek Treifa. The reason why it's not nullified is because this Tana of this Beitzah holds like the same Tana in the Beitzah or the Mishnah of Ktziot. I say Mishnah or Beitzah because really what we're going to read is the Mishnah, but it's a Beitzah that explains the Mishnah. So we're really actually, it says Ditnan as it says in the Mishnah, but what we're really reading is an explanation of the Mishnah in a Beitzah. So it says here, Lita Ktziot, what we're talking here is Truma of figs. The first thing to know is that Truma de'oraita by Torah law is only Dagan, Tirosh, and Yitzhar, which is grains, oil, like olives, and grapes for wine. So that's it, right? Tirosh is the wine, and Yitzhar is the olive oil. So this is only Rabbanan Truma. And because of that, Rabbi Eliezer is going to be lenient here according to the first opinion. We're going to have 2 opinions, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, about what Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua held. So litra ktziot shedrasal pi'igul. Now the next thing to know is that they would press figs into these circles. So when they press figs into the circles, oh, by the way, litra, it's very interesting. Litra, there's a good note in the Koran that I wanted to show you. I'll read it to you because it's a really good footnote. And it talks about the language of a litra. Litra, or in Latin, libra, the modern pound is descended from this measure of weight, and the abbreviation LB for pound is short for libra. So there you have LB is pounds. That's how you get LB is pounds from libra, and litra is from libra. So it basically means a pound of figs, according to this explanation. So you took a pound of figs and you pressed them into a circle. And now what's the problem? You have a bunch of these circles of figs that you don't know. You're not sure which one you pressed it into. Or you put it in a barrel. You put it on the top of a barrel. Okay. And therefore you're not sure which one it is. Or you put it in a basket. Rabbi Meir says the following. Rabbi Eliezer holds, the whole question now is you have truma in these figs. You're not sure. You have a whole bunch of them, but they're also above other pressed figs. So you have these rings of pressed figs, one on top of the other. So the question is, truma is normally nullified in 100. So the question, you have 100 against the 1, it's usually nullified. Less than that, no. So can you view the amount of figs, this pound of figs, as nullified to the entire barrel of figs, let's say that you have, or right, whatever it is? So he says, yes, ro'ina ta'elyonot ki'ilu hein prudot, even though this is pressed into each other, we view them as if they're all separate and as if you basically just have a barrel full of figs and not one cake upon another cake upon another cake upon another cake as separate fig cakes, so to speak. Okay, this is the way they kept the figs. It was a way kind of to store them. So it makes sense almost that they're going to view them as separate. First of all, we're going to be lenient here because it's only truma d'Rabbanan. Right? The whole issue is we don't want to have everything become truma. Otherwise, I'll have to give everything to the Kohen. So what do? You view the top ones as if they're separate. So then you look at how many figs are in this barrel. And if I have enough figs in this barrel to say I have 100 against the litra, the pound, right? I have, let's say 101 pounds, 100 pounds of non-truma, then it nullifies it. Rabbi Yoshua Omer, he says, look, you don't view them as separate. There's a cake at the top here. So a fig cake, right? I call it a cake. It's just pressed figs into each other, like a mold. So you view each of those fig things as if they're separate. So now what happens? How do laws of nullification work in this case? Well, you need to have 100 barrels or jugs or whatever it is that you use the figs to cover, right? That the figs are at the top. You need 100 of those. And if you have 100 of them, 101, then they'll nullify. If they're actually, he says 100. I don't want to get into the details of truma, whether you need 100 and a bit or 100 and a whole or 101. But let's just say if there's 100 of them, then you can say your litra of figs is nullified in the 100 barrels. But if you don't have 100 barrels, you can't look at the bottom as if it's connected to the top and use that. So basically, if you have 100 barrels, you assume only one of them has the problem. And the problem's at the top, the shulayim or all mutarim, everything underneath is permitted because it's the bottom ones are fine. It's just in order to get rid of that fig cake at the top, you're going to have 100 other barrels. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda's understanding of the machloket is, so Rabbi Eliezer Omer, im yesh shamei pumin ya'alu, v'im lav hapumin asurim v'shulayim mutarim. According to Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Eliezer says exactly what Rabbi Yeshua said in Rabbi Meir's version. Rabbi Yeshua says, and here Rabbi Yeshua is much more strict, afilu yesh sham shlosh me'ot pumin lo ya'alu. Even if you have 300, no can do, you can't nullify it at all. Now, that's already our opinion here, that litra diktziot, right, according to Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yeshua's opinion, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is that this is something, now, fig cakes are sometimes sold by the amount and sometimes sold by estimation. And here it's saying they can never be nullified. So there you have it. Kol davar, as we said on the previous daf, kol davar shebibinyan afilo d'Rabbanan lo batil. Since on the rabbinic law it's not net nullified, and that's in the figs, which are only truma d'Rabbanan, kol shekain, all the more so in a d'oraita, and that will explain our case of the safek treifa, of the egg. Now we just have one more line to explain here. They all agree that if you pressed it into a circle and you're not sure which circle, everyone agrees that it can be nullified. So this doesn't make any sense. Divrei hakol, the Gemara asks, Hainu plugtayu, that's exactly the debate. Not everybody agrees that it's nullified. So they say, Amar Rav Papa hachi kama. Now this is what it means. Drasa bi'igul ve'eino yodea be'eze mekom igul drasa, ilitzfona, ilidroma, divrei hakol ya'alu. If you press it in and you're not sure if it's on the north side or the south side or the left or the right, you're not sure where it is, then you can, we don't assume the whole, right? We don't, if we have a way to say it's all on the left, then we could say, well, the left is not nullified because we know it's on the left. But if we don't know where it is, then we could say regular laws of nullification will work. Rav Ashi Amar, Le'olam. Okay, so that was all just to explain what this Tana of the Litra Diktziot is. Now, and that was to explain the Safek Treifa case. If we said Safek Treifa, that Beitzah was talking about Safek Treifa, in which case it has nothing to do with Beitzah Shenolda, then how do we explain Spekha Surah? And if Spekha Surah was easy, why it's not nullified was more difficult. But in the end, we found this Tana who basically holds that because it's sometimes sold b'minyan, by number, it's never nullified. And that would explain the same thing by the egg. Now we're going to move on to a different answer. Rav Ashi Amar, La'olam safek yom tov safek chol. Really, the case is our egg case. It's a Beitzah Shenolda, and we just don't know, was it born on Yantif or was it born on a regular day? Then why is it not nullified? Because we also have to explain why is it forbidden. So the truth is really we're explaining why is it forbidden, even though it's a little bit tricky because we're using a term that's borrowed from the case of laws of nullification. But really it's coming to explain why it's a safek d'Rabbanan, and yet we're going to be strict. And the reason is, Dahave davar sheyesh lo mitirin, v'chol davar sheyesh lo mitirin, afilu b'd'Rabbanan lo batil. This is a very interesting topic. This usually relates to laws of nullification. And what it says is, if you have something, this is why we're very strict about chametz. We talked about this at the beginning of the Masechet. Why is chametz asur b'mashu and regular laws of nullification don't apply? And why is that? Because chametz is davar sheyesh lo mitirin. Chametz right now is forbidden, but after Pesach, it will be permitted. So therefore, any kind of amount, we're not going to say it gets nullified because eventually it'll be allowed. Okay. The main logic here, again, there's a big debate about the logic, and the truth is, there's a bit of a problem with the Ran's logic. The Ran is a famous shita. I'm not going to get into details so as not to confuse you too much. The Ran is a famous way of how he looks at the whole thing. He basically views it as heter mixed with heter. Usually in order for nullification to work, you have to have heter mixed with isser. It has to be a clash of two different things. Since this will eventually be permitted, it's really called heter, and heter don't mix, and therefore one doesn't nullify the other. I said I wasn't going to explain it, but I did have a hard time holding myself back. So that's the Ran's approach. But Rashi's approach, Shedavar Sheyesh Lo Matirin, is since it'll be permitted later, just wait. So therefore, the same logic would apply here. Since you have a safek case about an egg, you're not sure, was it born today, was it born yesterday? And today's Yantif, just wait till tomorrow. Very simple. Okay, I say that the Ran is difficult because if the whole logic of Davar Sheyesh Lo Matirin is inherent to the issues of nullification and has nothing to do with if you have a doubtful case, do you permit it or forbid it? Because this whole thing is, in order for nullification to work, you have to have heter and isser. And this is heter and heter, permitted, something that's permitted and something that's permitted. By nature, since it will be ultimately permitted, it's not permitted now. So this is a good example of a davar sheyesh lo matirin, because tomorrow it's okay, right? The fact that it was born on Yantif doesn't mean you can't eat it ever. Tomorrow you'll be able to eat it, so just wait. So again, the Ran's explanation has a big difficulty here, but if we go with Rashi, it makes perfect sense, which is just like we have davar sheyesh lo matirin in laws of nullification, the logic would be just wait, right? And therefore it's not nullified in this mixture. Likewise here, just wait. You have a doubt, you don't know, just wait for tomorrow. So therefore, and they say, B'chol davar sheyesh lo mitirin, afilu b'd'Rabbanan lo batil. Even if it comes to a d'Rabbanan, it's not nullified. They use the terminology of nullification, but we're now going to apply it to here, which means its safek is forbidden. And that also explains why once it's mixed with another 1,000, it's also not nullified because it's a davar sheyesh lo mitirin. Tanya. Now we're going to bring a Beitzah. Achirim omrim. So we're done now. We have two answers. Either the egg was a safek treifa, or the egg is a regular egg like our case, Beitzah Shenolda, and the whole reason is because it's a davar sheyesh lo mitirin, which would apply even a d'Rabbanan, and therefore regular laws of safek d'Rabbanan lekula don't apply. Now we're going to bring a Beitzah that seems to be at least somewhat like Beit Shammai, and we're going to have to explain. Achirim omrim, others say, Mishum Rabbi Eliezer. Now Rabbi Eliezer was known to be a Beit Shammai guy, so it makes sense. He often follows Beit Shammai's shita. Beitzah te'achel hi v'ima. So this matches perfectly with Beit Shammai, right? A beitzah, you can eat it, the egg and the mother. So again, we're going to ask, b'maya skina, just like we have with the first case in our Mishnah. Which case are we referring to? Ilema b'tarnigolet ha'omedet la'achila pshita dehi v'ima sharia. If you're going to say it's meant for eating, it's obvious. Even Beit Hillel holds that they're permitted because they're meant for eating. Therefore, they weren't muktzah. There's no muktzah issue. There's no nolad issue because it was, remember, the egg was already inside from yesterday, and it's totally fine. Ela, b'tarnigolet ha'omedet legadel beitzim. But if it's a tarnigolet that's supposed to legadel beitzim, hi v'ima asura. The egg and its mother should be forbidden. Why? You have to know something more here, which is that Rabbi Eliezer holds like Rabbi Yehuda when it comes to muktzah. So he would hold this as classic muktzah. It wasn't designated for eating, so you can't eat it, right? It wasn't prepared. It's muktzah. It's a nolad case. It's a muktzah case, right? The tarnigolet is muktzah because you designate it for eggs, for purposes of eggs, laying eggs, and not for eating it. So therefore, you can't eat it. So how do we explain this? Amar Rabbi Zera, we're going to have two explanations. Amar Rabbi Zera, actually, no, we're going to have one answer, and then we're going to question the answer. We're going to have two explanations of that. Te'achel agav ima. It's going to be eaten because of its mother. So what does this mean? Hechidami, what's the case? Amar Abaye, kigon shelekacha stam. What happened? You bought this without clarifying exactly why you were buying it. It wasn't clear. Are you buying it for eggs, for it to lay eggs, or are you buying it to slaughter? So therefore, what happened? Nishcheta, now you slaughtered it on Yantif. So if you designated it for laying eggs, then you put it aside, it's muktzah, set aside not to be used on Yantif. But if you didn't do anything, now we're going to learn, this is what we call breira. If you've been learning Gemara with us with the daf, you know we've learned this a few times. If not, I'll explain it in any case. What it means is retroactive designation. It means that I didn't buy it with any particular intent, so we don't know what I wanted. As soon as I do an action, it becomes clear what I originally intended. So if I slaughter this on Yantif, it becomes clear that what? Obviously, therefore, as soon as I slaughter it, it becomes clear that I clearly designated for eating. So we said, if it was designated for eating, obviously it would be mutar, even Beit Hillel would say that. So now what they're saying is, well, it wasn't so obvious. Rabbi Eliezer needed to say this because you might have thought we don't hold by breira. This is a case where it wasn't designated for anything in particular. Can we use the laws of breira to say, since I slaughtered it now, it becomes obvious that originally, before Yantif started, I had intended it to be for eating, which means it wasn't muktzah ever. So can you, right? Obviously, what they're saying is you could say that. Lo nishcheta, and if you just don't slaughter it on Yantif, then it becomes obvious that that clearly you meant for it to be laying eggs. So that's why this is allowed, because as soon as you slaughter it, it becomes obvious what your original intent was. Rav Meri Amar, Guzma Katane. Rav Meri says this is just pure exaggeration. And it says, Hivi Ima, in other words, really, it's true that it can be eaten and its mother can be eaten, but they're just kind of exaggerating. And we asked, isn't this obvious? So it is obvious, but they're just kind of saying it. Not only, right, just so you should know, the egg and even its mother is all permitted. And how do we know that this is the case? There's another Beitzah that's also, and we're going to prove this Beitzah clearly is exaggerating. You'll see why in a minute. And therefore, we're going to say the same thing by ours. You can eat the egg, it and its mother, and the afroach, a little chick, and its peel, the shell. Okay, so obviously you see where this is going. My klipato, and all this is telling you is, if you designated the animal for eating, then the bird, then the bird is allowed, the chick is allowed, the egg is allowed, right? All of these things are permitted, right? If the egg is a chick, then the chick is allowed. If the egg is a regular egg, then it's also allowed. So the point is, when it said hivi ima, it's true, it's obvious, but they're just using exaggerated language. So now they're going to say, Beitzah te'achel hivi ima ve'froch klipato. So my klipato, ilema klipa mamash, if you mean really the shell, klipa batachilehi, what? Nobody eats the shell, it's inedible. I don't know if you ever tried it. My daughter actually has tried it before. It's quite unpleasant. Ilema klipa mama, so then you can't. Ela efroch b'klipato. If you want to say it's the efroch in its klipa, meaning you can eat a chick when it's still in its shell, meaning when it comes out, and it comes out in the shell of the egg. Okay, they're now mentioning some machloket we're going to see on Daf Vav, and we'll learn it more there. But there's a machloket about when a chick turns from, this is kind of the rabbi's understanding, there's some sort of evolution. When does a chick, is it considered a sheretz? And when, which a sheretz is a creepy crawler that you're not allowed to eat. And when does it turn into like a fully formed chick that you can actually slaughter and eat? So there's a machloket between the rabbis and Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov about whether when it comes out, if it, here we'll see right now. Lo pliga Rabbanan alei Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, they don't disagree, ella, they only disagree in the following case. Once it actually came out, then there's a debate if it hasn't yet opened its eyes, is it still a sheretz or not? Only once it's opened its eyes does everyone agree that it's clearly a chicken, you can eat it. But if it never saw the air space of the world, meaning it's still in its shell, if you take it literally, the afrach in its klipa, for sure, lo pligi, everyone agrees it's still a sheretz, which means you can't eat it. So it can't possibly be saying you can eat the efrach in its shell. So you can't say it means the actual shell, that you eat the shell. You can't say it means the chick in its shell, because that also wouldn't be permitted. Ela efrach uklipato guzma. It's just exaggerating. You say you can eat the hen, the chicken, and its egg, and obviously, right, everything else, right? Meaning you can so eat it, you can even eat the shell with it and the chick with it, right? That doesn't really mean literally that you can eat it. So hachanami teachel hivima guzma. Therefore, also by us, it's just exaggeration, in which case it's not questionable. What are we talking about? It's obviously talking about a chicken that was meant for slaughtering, okay, for eating. Itma. Now we get into another machloket, which is going to connect to something we saw previously. Shabbat, and back to our Mishnah, really. Shabbat v'Yom Tov. What if you have Shabbat and Yom Tov? Until now, we've been talking about an egg that was born on Yom Tov. And we said, and according to some of the explanations, that really the main issue is an egg born, if we say it's Hachana de Rabba, which Rabba's opinion about, it's an issue of Hachana, things have to be prepared in advance. Then we said the issue is a Yom Tov that comes after Shabbat, and the egg was born on day number 2. Now we're going to say, what if the egg was born on day number 1 of a 2-day Shabbat and Yom Tov? So Shabbat v'Yom Tov. Rav Amar nolda b'zeh asura b'zeh. If it was born on day number 1, it's forbidden on day number 2. V'Rabbi Yochanan Amar nolda b'zeh muteret b'zeh. If it was born on day number 1, it's already permitted on day number 2. So now we have to understand what is the logic of their opinions. Nema kasav Rav kedusha achati. Maybe Rav says that when we have a Shabbat and a Yom Tov next to each other, we view it all as one kedusha, one sanctity, one whole thing, which means that the kedusha basically continues. It's like one long day. It is very relevant. Upcoming Rosh Hashanah, call it Yom Arichta. All right, we're going to get into this. Rav, but didn't Rav say, this is a sugya in Eruvin, if you recall, it was about, can I make, if you have a Shabbat and a Yom Tov, can you make an Erev Tchumen to go in one direction one day, and another Erev Tchumen to go in a different direction on the other day? Can we view these as 2 distinct days, or is it one long day? Can you say basically for Shabbat, I want my house to kind of be established 2,000 cubits from my city to the east, and on Yom Tov, I want it to be 2,000 cubits from the city to the west, and then one day I can go one direction, one day I can go the other. So Rav had said there, halakha ka'arba'az kinim, 4 rabbis, okay, among them Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabbi Elazar the son of Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Elazar the son of Rabbi Shimon, some others, va'aliva de Rabbi Eliezer, and the halakha is like them according to Rabbi Eliezer, the amal, shtei kedushotin. No, he holds clearly, we view these as 2 separate days of sanctity, which means you can actually make an Erev Tchumen in either direction. So you can't say that Rav holds that it's Kedusha Achat, and that's why Beitzah Shenolda on Shabbat is forbidden on the following day on Yom Tov. So Ela Hacha B'Hachana de Rabba Kamiflige. Their machloket, their debate must be about Hachana de Rabba. Meaning, Rav Itle Hachana de Rabba, he says everything has to be prepared from before Shabbat. Now here there's a bit of a switch from the last time we discussed Hachana de Rabba. Last time we discussed it, we were talking about Yom Tov that follows Shabbat. The egg was born on the 2nd day, and it was already prepared on Shabbat because 24 hours before it's ready in the womb, in the chicken. And then the whole issue was, but it wasn't prepared when Friday afternoon because it wasn't finished being created yet. Now Hachana switches a little, and Tosfot really asks about this, okay? Because basically what we're saying here is it was born on Shabbat, and what we want to say is it wasn't prepared. It wasn't born. It was actually prepared before Shabbat because 24 hours before it was already ready. Okay, and that's what Tosfot says. I don't understand this because we already say, if you're looking at Hachana de Rabba Kamiflige, it was already prepared from yesterday. So Tosfot explains that you have to add here that there's another Hachana inherent in birth. Okay, and this raises some questions on the last time we mentioned Hachana de Rabba because it really is used differently. And now it's saying, what does it mean to be prepared? It has to be born before. That being born is some sort of also preparation, even though it was actually ready before. Maybe you say the sugya actually disagrees with the way we understood Hachana de Rabba previously. And this idea about that the chick is 24 hours before, maybe it just disagrees with that principle. Maybe you didn't know about that, right? The Gemara here maybe didn't understand that principle, the 24 hours before it was already ready. So they seem to be saying that just being born means it has to have been born on Friday, not that it has to have been created inside the chicken. So now they say, so again, we're trying to explain Rav, who said if it was born on Shabbos, the next day, Yantif, it's forbidden. And Rabbi Yochanan says it's not forbidden. So we're going to say very easily, Rav eat le'achana de Rabba. Rav says everything has to be prepared before. And Rabbi Yochanan le'achana de Rabba, he doesn't hold by this law. He doesn't think it's a thing. Kitanai, and we say, in fact, this whole thing is a machloket Tanaim, a debate among Tanaim. Nolda b'Shabbat te'achel b'Yom Tov te'achel b'Shabbat. According to the first Beitzah, the first opinion in this Beitzah, it's totally fine. This is Rabbi Yochanan, no problem. Eat it the next day, right? Our Mishnah was talking about Beitzah Shenolda today, but if it was born yesterday, even if yesterday was Shabbat, you can eat it on Yantif because it's two different Kedushot, and we don't have to worry about Hachana. Rabbi Yehuda, Omer Mishum Rabbi Eliezer, Adayini Machloket Shebet Shammai Omrim Te'achel, Bet Hillel Omrim Lo Te'achel. According to the second opinion here, Rabbi Yehuda, he says, no. The same debate that Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel have about a Beitzah Shenolda today, they're going to have also on a Beitzah Shenolda on Shabbat, and you want to eat it the following day, which is Yom Tov, because if you view it all as one Kedusha, and things have to be prepared before, then it's not considered prepared. Now we're going to have some stories. Ish bezichne de Rav Ad bar Ava. He had a guest. Havalu hanach beitzim Yom Tov l'Shabbat. He had eggs that were laid on Shabbat, and now he wanted to eat them on Yom Tov. It was on Yom Tov, and he wanted to eat them on Shabbat, the reverse case that was discussed. Ata the Kameh, he went before him. Amar lei, my lat v'inu ha'ina v'nichle l'machal. He says, can I roast them today on Yantif so that I can eat them tomorrow on Shabbat? In other words, his assumption was I can eat them tomorrow on Shabbat. The question is, can I cook them today? So what was his answer? Amar lei, Rav Ada says to him, my datech, what do you think? Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, I understand you want to pass like Rabbi Yochanan. We have a principle. When Rav disagrees with Rabbi Yochanan, we hold like Rabbi Yochanan. And that's why you want to permit to eat tomorrow on Shabbat. However, you want to cook them today on Yantif? He says, Afilu, the Rabbi Yochanan, lo kashare, ala legom ala machal. He only allows you to eat it tomorrow. Aval biyome lo, but you can't touch it today. You can't not touch it, but you can't move it. It's muktzah. Today it's muktzah. Tomorrow, right? Today it's Yantif. It's muktzah today. It was born today. Can't do anything with it. How do we know this? Ba'atanya, chad beitzah shenolda b'Shabbat, chad beitzah shenolda b'Yom Tov, ein metaltalin ota lo lechasot b'takli v'lo lismoch b'k'cha'ei hamita. It says a beitzah that was born on, that was laid on Shabbat or on Yom Tov, you can't carry it for any reason, not to cover a utensil, like let's say you have a jug and you want to stick it in the top of the jug, and not to lean the bed on it. Okay, the base of the bed. This is a whole interesting thing in and of itself. We don't have time today to get into it, but there are people who've tried these experiments that an egg actually is strong enough to hold a base of like a beam of a bed, like one of those poles that the bed, kind of the legs of the bed. Some people say it actually means something much lighter. It's like to straighten something up. Anyway, that's a whole separate thing, but we don't have time today. Ushbezichne de Rav Papa. Again, we have a story where the guest of Rav Papa. Again, some people say it wasn't his guest, it was just some person who came and asked him a question. Can I eat it tomorrow? He says, listen, come back to me tomorrow. Don't ask me today. Okay. Sometimes your kids go, they ask you a question, you're like, listen, it's just not a good time. Why was it not a good time? Because Rav would not put up, this is Rav Papa, but he learned from Rav. Rav would never start teaching something to put an Amora. Amora was like a translator to tell someone else a halacha. He would never teach something from Yom Tov till the next day because of shichrut, because he had drunk wine and he wasn't clear-headed enough to give up psak. So the guy comes back to him the next day. Amar le, he says to him, Iku hashe ishtale. It's good that you didn't come yesterday, because if I would have taught you yesterday when I wasn't so clear-headed, I would have given you the wrong answer. And I would have said to you, Rav and Rabbi Yochanan. Right, when Rav and Rabbi Yochanan debate, we pass like Rabbi Yochanan, so yes, you can eat it tomorrow. But then I realized that Rava said, now that I'm more clear-headed and I looked it up, this is also a good example of don't answer on the spot until you really look something up properly. He said, I realized that Rava says, the halacha is like Rav in 3 egg cases. Okay, we're going to see them all coming up. One is our case, and now we're going to see bein lekula, bein lechumra. So in this case, it would be lechumra. We're going to pass on like Rav lechumra that a Beitzah shenolda b'Shabbat is forbidden the following day on Yom Tov or the reverse. Okay, that's what he says. So another one we're going to see later today is Beitzah shenolda on the first day of Yantif, on a Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galuyot in Chutz La'aretz, right outside of Israel, when you have 2 days. Then, if it's born on one day, you can eat it on the other day. Rav actually permits it in that case. That's why it says bein lekula, bein lechumra. And there's a third case, which we'll see later, where Rav is actually stringent as well. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yochanan said, now we're going to a new case. If you have branches that fell from a tree on Shabbat, you can't use them for a fire on Yantif, because again, this is now, what is this? Shabbat to Yantif. We have Sunday is Chag. So Shabbat, your wood falls from your branches fall from your tree. Can you use them the following day? Right? That day you can't use them because worried you might pull it off. But the day before, but if it happened the day before, maybe you can. So he says you can't. Now, Beitzah shenolda, remember what he said. If it's born on Shabbos, you can use it the next day on Yantif. So they say, Ba'al teshiveni Beitzah. He says, don't start asking me. I know you're going to ask me, but why is this not exactly the same as the egg? Again, we're comparing things that fell off a tree to eggs because it's very similar. My time. So he says it's not the same. Beitzah, because the whole concern is what are people going to think? So now you have to get into what he thinks people will think. Beitzah, mishum de biyoma nami chazia legom'a. You take this egg now. It was born on Shabbat and you want to eat it on Yantif the next day. On Shabbat, could you eat the egg? No, you can't because it was born that day. But were it not to have been born, you could just eat the egg if you want raw without cooking it. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it, but people do, right? Forget about salmonella. But people do theoretically eat raw eggs. Right? If you ever saw the Rocky movies, right? He eats raw eggs. So now, since theoretically you could swallow it like that, and yet it's clear you weren't allowed to eat it yesterday. So therefore, it's clear the only reason why you weren't allowed to eat it yesterday was because of it was Beitzah shenolda. So when we permit you the following day to eat it, which is what Rabbi Yochanan says, right? Everybody knows that it's forbidden the day it was laid. It's just not forbidden on Yantif because it was laid yesterday. So everyone knows that when you eat it the following day, the reason why we didn't permit it yesterday is because it was born on that day. And then everyone knows the law, which is on the day it's born, you can't eat it. Okay, but the following day, you would be able to eat it. But eitzim, right? And that's again, if we say it's all a gzeira, but you might come to think, but you won't come to think because this is different. This isn't today. It happened yesterday. So we're not really worried. But what about the wood? So the wood has something else going on. The eitzim, de lo chazu liyomayu. Can you burn that wood on Shabbos when it fell from the tree? No. Why can't you burn it? Because you can't make a fire on Shabbat. It's true. You also couldn't burn it because it fell off from the tree that day. But when people see that you didn't use it on Shabbat and you did use it on Yantif, what are they going to think? That maybe you didn't use it yesterday because you couldn't make a fire yesterday. And therefore, they're not going to know. So if we permit it the following day, people will think you didn't use it yesterday because you couldn't make a fire. But had you been able to make a fire, maybe you could have used wood that fell from a tree. So therefore, they'll get confused with the halacha, right? You'll think because yesterday it was only because you can't burn things, but not because you can't make a fire, not because it fell off the tree that day. And therefore, we forbid it also on Yantif so that you don't get confused and think that even if it fell that day, it would be permitted. Amar Rav Matna. Now Rav Matna is going to bring another halacha about wood that falls from a tree. So we understand how we got here because we were comparing it to the egg case. Now that we're here, we're going to talk about something else. It seems you have wood that falls straight from your tree and it falls right into your fire pit. And it starts burning. So what do? You add a lot of wood that you had already prepared from before that wasn't muktzah, and it basically gets nullified in that pile of wood and all is good. To which the Gemara asks a few questions. Number one, but when you start stoking the fire, you're going to move muktzah things that weren't permitted today because they weren't prepared before Shabbat. They were on the tree. They say, no. Since the majority is heter, this is classic laws of nullification. It's basically caught up in the majority. It's not looked as if you're actually mixing something that's forbidden. Number 2 question. If you know anything about laws of nullification, you know that you can't cause something to be nullified. When we say, the classic always is, my drop of milk fell into my cholent. Is it nullified or not? Right? We always say, batal b'shishim, if there's 60 times the amount of meat, then it's okay. Nobody pours milk into cholent, say, oh, you know what? This might taste good. Let me put in less than, whatever laws might nullify it. I'll put in less than 1/60th, and I'll see how it tastes. You can't do that. You can't purposely. It's only a principle that works. If I already did it, then it's nullified. But nobody says go do it intentionally. Utnan, and it says, it says in the Mishnah, you can't do it ab initio. So afilu b'derabanan lo batil, right? Sorry, I skipped a line. Hanimile b'deoraita. They say, oh no, actually, is only when it comes to Torah law. Aval b'derabanan, but when it comes to rabbinic law, mevatlin, it works. And our case is derabanan because it's only a derabanan about these 8 seams, so that I don't come to pull them myself, and therefore it's okay. Uli Rav Ashi damar, but wait, another question. According to Rav Ashi, who says, "Kol davar sheyesh lo matirin, afilu b'derabanan lo batil." If it's eventually going to be permitted, then even in 1,000, it's not nullified. Now, that's what Rav Ashi says. That's what we learned before. So this would, even though theoretically laws of nullification should apply, and I can even throw it in and on purpose, I can make it nullified. But you can't do that if it's going to be permitted tomorrow, because which this wood will be. The wood fell from the tree today. Tomorrow, it should be allowed. So just wait till tomorrow. So what can you say according to that? Ma'ika l'meimar, hanimile. Oh, when Rav Ashi says that, that's only hecha de'ita l'isura be'ene. That's only when you can still see the forbidden item. However, hacha, what happens here? Mikla kali isura. This burns immediately. It fell into a fire. You can't even see it in actuality. In that case, we don't say davar sheyesh lo matirin, you have to wait, because it's almost insignificant, right? The whole idea of things not becoming nullified is that they have significance to them. This has no significance because it's going to be burnt in a minute and almost disappear. So therefore, you're allowed to. Okay, that was another aside we got into about the salacha of matna, but what you do if they fall into your oven on Shabbat, and you can actually nullify them on purpose. Next, we get into the famous machloket about eggs on 2 days of yantif in Chutz La'aretz, outside of Israel. Itmar, shnei yamim tovim shel galuyot. Rav amar nolda bezeh muteret bezeh. As I said before, Rav is mekel here, lenient. He says, if it was born today, it's mutar the second day. Okay, born on day number 1, it's muteret on the second. Rav Asi amar nolda bezeh, asura bezeh. Okay, what's the obvious logic of Rav? Because either way you look at it, if today is Yantif, right, the whole issue here is we're keeping 2 days of Yantif because we weren't sure based on the calendar which day was Yantif. So if today is Yantif, then tomorrow is not Yantif, and of course it's allowed. If today, right, if it was born on the first day, then the second day it's not even Yantif anymore. If yesterday wasn't Yantif and today is Yantif, then it was already permitted from before Yantif. It was prepared. So it's also okay. So that's obvious. Rav Asi says, Nolda bezeh, asura bezeh. If it was born on one, it's forbidden on the other. Why is that? So let's try to understand Rav Asi. Lema kasav Rav Asi kedusha achati. Does he view 2 days of Yantif and Chutz La'aretz as one sanctified day? Basically meaning the rabbis came and said, listen, we don't know what day it is. We're going to just call this whole day Yantif. Okay, one long Yantif day, in which case it's born on one day. It's not permitted the next day because it's all viewed as one long day. But that can't be, because guess what Rav Asi also does? Something that we don't do. He makes Havdalah at the end of one day before the next day. In other words, right in between, he makes Havdalah in case today was really the day. So it can't be that he holds it was one sanctity. Otherwise, there would be no purpose for Havdalah in the middle. So they say Rav Asi sapuke misapkale. He actually was not 100% clear whether we view it. His debate was, we're not really sure. Okay, 1 second. Rashi says, what is misap? Sipuke misapkale. Imchok chachamimu shutala lagayol idorot. The question is, it's a really basic question about Yom Tov Sheni. This law that the rabbis instituted, that we should keep Yom Tov Sheni, is it, okay, now let's read in Rashi. Afilu yirbu mehem chachmei ha'itim yuosinoto shnayim. right? In other words, they said this is going to be forever in Chutz La'aretz. It doesn't matter if eventually we know exactly what the calendar is, okay? Doesn't make a difference, right? That's really what we do, even though we don't know. But his question is that the way it is? And therefore, it's basically one long day. Oh, I'm skipping down to the next line in Rashi. Or is it that we really don't know which it is? And then it's only going to be if it's a suffix. In other words, if we know, then we know. But they institute them out of suffix, out of doubt. And therefore, we're going to have to say Havdalah in both. So therefore, since we don't know, so he's machmir when it comes to Havdalah, and he's machmir when it comes to an egg. It's going to go in both directions. So now we're going to have support for each claim. First, we're going to start with support for Rav Asi. Amar Rabbi Zera, kavatei Rav Asi mistabra. Seems like he has a lot of, makes sense what he says. How do we know? Because now we know exactly, we have a calendar, and yet we still treat it as 2 days, right? Even though we know we have a calendar, we know exactly when it is. So it seems like really it must be an issue that the rabbis instituted it, possibly they instituted it for generations in order to be concerned. Right? And then they instituted for generations that we're going to always remember how they did it. And then it's kind of treated like one sanctified day. Okay. We don't actually hold like Rav Asi that we make Havdalah, but that element we hold like Rav Asi. Whereas Rav says, Noda b'zeh muteret b'zeh, right? He says it's a doubt which day is which 100%. So therefore, this doesn't really match his opinion. Why would we still be keeping 2 days of Yantif? Amar Abaye says, no. I can prove it more like Rav. Why? Ditnan, it says in the Mishnah. Now we're going to get some history of 2 days and how it happened. When they determined the new calendar, what day was going to be Rosh Chodesh, the new month, they basically would put up bonfires at the top of mountains, and the word would spread pretty quickly that way because one mountain to another, and you can even get to Chutz La'aretz that way. Kutim, right? You might not get to America or something like that, but where they were, you could really get to the surrounding countries. Kutim, but the Kutim, the Shomonim, decided to mess us up, and they lit torches one day when it wasn't Rosh Chodesh, and they messed everybody up. So but then they said, okay, we can't, this system doesn't work. We're going to have to send messengers because otherwise the Kutim are going to mess us up and make a bonfire and, try to make it look like it's Rosh Chodesh. So messengers obviously take a lot longer. V'ilu bitzlu kutim, but what seems implied from this Mishnah, that if the kutim were not around anymore and you didn't have to worry about them, avdinan chad yoma, wherever the bonfires would get to, you'd only need 1 day, meaning we could get much farther. By the 15th of the month, they would definitely know. Most of the holidays, remember, on the 15th of the month. But it seems like wherever the messengers would get to, even without the kutim, right? Wherever the messengers would get to, they would only have to keep 1 day. So it seems very clear that this isn't everyone has to keep 2 days. So, so if that's the case, right, which we now proved Rav. So if that's the case, I don't get what we do today. My time of Dina Trey Yomi. So why do we do 2 days today? We have a calendar. What do we need this for? Mishum de Shalchumitam. They sent from there a message from Israel to Babylonia. Interesting that this teaching came from outside of Babylonia. Keep the tradition of your fathers. Because maybe the authorities will forbid us to do this. They'll forbid us to basically create this calendar, and they'll mess up the calendar. Exactly what this concern is, I'm not 100% sure what they could forbid exactly, but what might happen, they'll mess up this whole system that we have of the calendar, and then we'll have to start then we won't know anymore, and we'll have to go back to the original plan. And this is the reason why, which is, raises a big question nowadays, right? Why do we still keep this, right? So it seems clear we keep it because they were told, keep the minhag of your fathers, right? Because maybe at some point we'll lose the calendar. We won't know the secret anymore of how we created this calendar, and we'll have to recreate it from the beginning. And therefore, we still keep 2 days outside of Israel. Okay, we're going to stop here because now a whole new thing starts, which is very fun because we're going to learn right before Rosh Hashanah about Shnei Yamim Tovim Shel Rosh Hashanah. Is that different from Shnei Yamim Tovim Shel Galuyot? So very interesting, very relevant. It's always fun when that happens. We will start that on Sunday morning. Shabbat Shalom or Shavua Tov.